Well, this show is full of coincidences, isn't it?
It is. I don't know how you do it.
It's extraordinary. This bloke I spoke to yesterday, and by coincidence, he's agreed to come back today. His name is Jonathan English and is the son of the aforementioned John English. Welcome to Two Blokes Chatting, Jonathan.
Thanks, Two Blokes. Thanks for having me.
No, great to have you on board. And I didn't realise that you were actually a television star.
Television star.
All right, I'm stretching it a little bit. Unusual for this program. I did a spot of research, and
You can't do that.
I stumbled over This Is Your Life, and there's a young, very intense-looking young man with. I'm trying to describe the haircut. It was dark. It was interesting to describe, but there he popped up on screen, and then he played bass in a song that his dad sang with a whole stack of other luminaries.
That would be the one. I remember that day very well. I got out of school early for it.
Yeah.
Year 11.
Okay, yeah. Well, it was a very intensive haircut, and Grant and I are both looking at it jealously, I can tell you. But it
was the 90s. Everyone had the Seattle hair going.
Yeah, it was an interesting look. But enough about your hair. We are here to talk about a man who I regularly say on this program is undoubtedly the most underrated Australian performer in my memory, John English. But he was Dad.
The late, great Dad. Mate, talk about that. I think he actually had better hair than me.
There's no doubt. That's absolutely a given.
No, he was incredible. And I always was reticent to say it too loudly lest I look like the biased son. But I just loved his music. I loved his intensity and his performance and his energy. And a unique voice in Australian music, and I think music in general. He was a remarkable storyteller.
He's one of those remarkable people that were able to be everything, really. I mean, one of the early things I remember, of course, watching was Against the Wind, and not realising he was everything. A great actor, performed the music in it, and as I was mentioning,
wrote the music,
yeah. And he's been a presence in my life for as long as I can remember. I mean, we were talking about it off air with being on Hey Hey at Saturday regularly, and I was just saying to you that I had a memory of him performing as Ronald McDonald one night. You've seen that clip then?
Yes, I have, minus the makeup, thank God. But he just said yes to a Ronald McDonald outfit. I think out the back of the Hey Hey studios, which coincidentally were next door to Altogether now, they had just a jumble of random costumes. And I think Daryl would always approach the guests and say, can you wear something a bit funny for the kids and that? And Dad always put his hand up and said yes. He was a good team player, was Dad.
And in fact, just around the corner from where I now live, as it happens. But I think the thing that I always remember, John, and I think I might have mentioned to you when I spoke to you the other day, he has ruined my enjoyment of musical theatre forever, because I can remember, I reckon it was July 1973, I'd played a game of school footy in the afternoon. I was showered and sent off with my mother and brother to the Palais Theatre in St Kilda and saw undoubtedly the greatest performance on musical theatre ever, John English as Judas. Extraordinary in Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh, and I've got a tape from the desk of that run at the Palais in 1973, and the performances are phenomenal across the board. I mean, Dad was magnetic. He had Marshall Hines was in there, and Trevor White, and John Paul Young, Stevie Wright, and the performances were out of this world. I've seen a few productions of Superstar over the years, and I've had, dare I say, the John Farnham, Olivia Newton-John one touted a few times at me, but I'd stay true to my dad. That's just the best version of that show I've ever heard.
Well, I think that the John Farnham, Olivia Newton-John one, again, I've not seen any others because I refuse to go because I just know it's not going to be anywhere near as good. But was that more like a concert than it was a performance?
Yeah, well, that's right. It was a concert series from around about, I want to say, 1990. So I was a little kid when it was on. And
I did go to see that show, and it was more of a concert than what you would have seen back in the day. And they still talked about the legacy of John English being in that show, that they were trying to live up to his standard.
I think the other thing that made that 73 version of Superstar amazing, you've given out some amazing names there, But on top of that, there was Russell Hitchcock and Graham Russell, who went on to go Air Supply. Rory O'Donoghue, who was, of course, famous for his work with Auntie Jack. There was G.O. Tommy Dicehart was in it. The version that was in Melbourne had Michelle Forden playing the role that Marcia took on in Sydney. It was just an absolute who's who. Chrissy Hammond, who went on to form Cheetah with her sister, Lindsay. Just an extraordinary group of people who used Superstar as it's almost like its platform to launch.
Honestly, and that's a real credit to Harry and Miller. Because Harry was adamant in finding young unknowns across the board, and a couple of big names like Stevie, who obviously came from Easy Beats, and Reg Livermore, who's big in theatre. But he just wanted to audition kids from the garages, like my dad, and they just... He had a knack for finding the talent where it lay. And
what was John doing at the time? Was he well known at that stage?
My dad was in his high school band, which had sort of morphed into what was called the Sebastian Hardy Blues Band at that point. And he'd been out of high school about 5 years or so, I think. So they had been doing nights all around the joint, 2 or 3 appearances in places like King's Cross and all the different pubs and clubs, cruises. He actually backed Johnny O'Keefe for a bit, because Johnny O'Keefe would just hire cheap suburban bands to do his bidding. And in daytime, he was paying bills, so he was an accountant's assistant, like an old school bookkeeper, all pencil, and a gardener, I think. And he had a teacher's degree at uni. So he was mooching about as a young lad, newly married, getting the bills paid.
I think one of the particular pieces of accounting work he did, someone brought in 30 pieces of silver.
Indeed.
Thank you. Just a little biblical joke there for those who are playing along at home. So it was obviously a platform, and in all honesty, he could have walked away at that point and he still would have been famous in Australian musical theatre. The thing, though, is you would describe that as a rock opera, I suspect was how they were touting it. Since then, you would describe the music of Against the Wind as being called folky, if you like. You've got his Gilbert and Sullivan work. He's got his 70s, pop rock sort of stuff. And he could act, as a serious actor, as was seen in Against the Wind. He was also a comedy actor, as per All Together Now. He was, there was not much he couldn't do. Maybe find his hairdresser, that might have been something he couldn't do, but otherwise he was pretty good.
Mate, he was extraordinary in the depths of his talents, and I think the litany of skills you just listed off there is testament to, I think, just how hungry he was all the time. He was compelled to chase the next adventure. So something like rock and roll he'd been doing all his life. And he brought elements of rock and roll to everything he did. But the theatre stage opened up such a passion in him that his recording career really rested a lot on what sounded like Superstar in the early days. Albums like Wine Dark Sea and It's All a Game are very theatrical, as was in the 70s, that was part of the course. And then he landed acting gigs off the back of Judas from the Crawford productions like Homicide and Matlock Police, these 70s cop shows where he'd play homiciding, axe-wielding, drug-crazy thieves. So, you can see how the line got sort of drawn there. But someone had the bright idea at Channel 7 to take a homicidal, axe-wielding maniac, hippie rock star and make him a romantic lead in a period piece. So whoever did that should get a case of beer bought for them, because that was really the linchpin to get Dad to be so versatile across the board.
Yeah, and it gave you the impression from some of the stuff. I actually, if you haven't seen it before, folks, the This Is Your Life program is available on YouTube, albeit not necessarily legally, I suspect, but it's in 4 parts. And you just get a sense that he might have been a bit unsure of his talent in the early 70s, that he probably needed a bit of a boot in the bum to get himself going.
I think Dad, genuinely speaking, as his son, I think he wrestled constantly with an element of imposter syndrome, which is very hard to avoid in music. He had a real swagger and an upfront bravado is the word I'm trying to say. That was hard to beat. He had an ego that could floor people, but behind it was, oh gosh, am I actually good enough? Am I actually doing right? And he would just try. And what you're saying there is, even in that This Is Your Life thing, I could see him being quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because he's like, no one's actually talked about my life yet.
Yeah.
I've played all these other characters, you know.
And funnily enough, in that segment, without giving too much away, the one person he's seen the most comfortable talking to outside of his family was the mate that he tossed the coin to go out with your mum. It was like, because it was his schoolmate rather than all these other luminaries of the music industry and rugby league industry that came through.
Definitely. Lonnie 7 Minutes is a lovely bloke. Dad had so many good stories about them and their basketball days in high school and all that sort of thing. I think, again, I want to say it's a real feather in the cap for my dad, who was down to earth unerringly. He got along better with the road crew, the tech crew, than he did the other artists and the musos. Even like my brother and I went with him to the Countdown Spectacular, the big arena show that went around in 2006. Just to see how it was all going, and he was still playing Six Ribbons and Hollywood 7, and he was still just having cigarettes out the back with the sound tech guys, rather than sort of catching up with Daryl and Skyhooks and all those boys.
We just need to pause momentarily.
Medical authorities warn that smoking is a health hazard.
Sorry, we just had to stick that in, for reasons of contractual reasons.
We're talking about the John English that we've seen on the TV, etc. John, how was he as dad?
He was immense. He was such a wonderful, wonderful dad. So full of joy and absurdity and fun. He was not a clean behind your ears and in bed by 8 kind of guy at all. And in any venture that we 4 children found ourselves in that was of any pressure, Dad would be there to just take the edge off and let you see the absurdity of it all. He was a tremendous fan of Monty Python. And so we had a very Python-esque upbringing where we just laughed all the time. It was such a fun adventure.
Doesn't surprise me in the slightest, to be honest. And as a former school teacher, I can only imagine what it must have been like on parent-teacher night, for example, when young Jonathan is coming in with his parents. That must be a bit difficult for performers anywhere, whether it's John or anyone else, I guess. That whole "Aren't you John English?"
Yeah, look, I think we only managed one.
Excellent.
The entire school time. And yes, it was very, oh no, we're being watched. Oh gosh. It was like going out to have lunch with him, or heaven forbid, the Easter show, something like that. We would go out to these things and it'd just be pandemonium. And it's very silly. All very nice people wanting to tell him where they first seen him and things like that. But, you get more than about 12 of them and you're like, let's find
let's go somewhere else.
But the interesting thing, the reason that we're talking to you today, it's about 10 years since he passed, and there's some great CDs coming out. When did you get the idea to get some of these rarities going and re-releasing some of these albums?
Honestly, Dad had been signed to a wonderful record label run by Robert Rigby called Ambition Music, and Robert was in touch with me through the years. I'd actually helped put together the Six Ribbons compilation, the best of, that is being re-released with new artwork, and on the back of that, after Dad passed, I was given the huge responsibility of managing his catalogue and sort of vetoing any creative ideas that were going to come across, just to protect his legacy effectively. And I had boxes of tapes and records, and I had to chase down different things. What I wanted was to find all the music he'd ever made and make sure I had a good archive of it. And then these forgotten songs and these unreleased things were sitting there, and Robert said to me, we can clean them up and we can release them. So I did all the research and put it all together. And it was just a joy. I did it mostly during the lockdown years. And it was like part of the grieving process, if I can be honest. It was a wonderful way to reconnect with Dad. And, I'm just so proud of that collection. You'll find stuff on here that no super fan has ever heard. So I've got them beat on one.
Well, I think you are his super fan, by the sounds of it. And from Neil's got it in his hand there at the moment. We're going to hear a song from it when we're finished chatting. But what's some of the highlights on the album that we can expect to see and hear?
Highlights for me personally, Bad Seed, which was originally a Kim Carnes track. and it was recorded for the Hollywood 7 album in 1976. And I've got the back of the reel-to-reel tape where it's given notes and it said, brilliant, yes, going on. And then it never appeared on the track listing. I have to ask Richard Lush whatever happened in that decision process, but it just sat there for 50 years, never being heard. Bad Seed to me is a wonderful one. And then there's all these early versions of songs that will wind up in his rock opera Paris. Things like Breakfast in the Ruins and King of the Blind, Looking for Love. Really, really tremendous little gems that haven't seen the light of day. That are what you'll get is a sense of how he actually approached his craft in writing and recording. Because I'm talking about things that still have the hiss of the tape, and he's just trying to get the take. He's not thinking too hard about the performance. You really get a sense of him thinking his way through these songs.
Well, I had the good fortune on Tuesday of sitting across the table from a Mr. Rigby of Ambition Records, and I can tell, like, I've spoken to Robert a lot over the journey because he helps us find people like Jonathan English to chat to, and you can just tell by the way he was talking about these three releases that he's genuinely excited as well. It's not just people who are fans. I think what he is, I think obviously a fan, but as a record company owner, if that's not an old-fashioned term, he is genuinely excited about getting these CDs out.
Oh, his passion is formidable. And we were so fortunate to have meetings with Peter Ricks, who was Dad's old manager, and Marsha Hines' manager, to get to agree to re-release Jokers and Queens finally in digital platforms, because that was a glaring omission on the catalogue. And that was down to Robert really pushing.
Yep.
And Dad was one of his first signings when he went independent and created Ambition, and he just... he really impressed upon me someone who gave more than their 2 cents worth about it. It wasn't just a money-making exercise for him. He loved my dad and his music. So Robert's a legend.
He even bought me a coffee, which makes him a real legend. Now, we've got Steve from Bamborough, who is a very regular listener to this program, and he's asked the question, did John ever do a version of Stevie Wright's Black-Eyed Bruiser?
No. That's a very good one to... have knocked together. No, and I can see the connection, absolutely. He never did Black Eyed Bruiser. Well, I do know that right before he passed, he was over in Sweden and he got up with the Angels and did Fashion and Fame.
Oh, that's a relief. I thought you were going somewhere else there where we might have to say something rude, which we don't want that.
You can say whatever rude things you want.
No, we're not allowed to say it on the radio. We get ourselves into trouble. We're never going to see your face again. No, that bit.
Now, of course, Neil mentioned that you played the bass on the This Is Your Life. Music part of your life as well?
Absolutely, yeah, I do. I was playing from when I was about 12, and Dad was showing me acoustic chords out backstage during Pirates and that. I took it up because Nirvana were very big, and all my mates were taking up and growing out here. But Dad ever generous to me, gave me a little weekend gig helping the road crew push power amps around leagues, clubs and pubs and that around the country. And I'd sit there backstage while they were playing and just practice. And then he got me up to play bass a couple of times. And then the This Is Your Life thing happened, and I've just been playing ever since. So coming up on 30 years worth of music. My wife's a tremendous country singer, and I've been on her journey with her since 2012. She got a gold guitar and a couple of CMC fan awards. She's done immensely well. We've written songs in Nashville. It's been a great time.
Neil writes on a piece of paper, must get Jonathan's wife on to talk about her music career at some point.
Yeah.
And so the 3 albums that we're talking about, because we've kind of talked about them at random and so on, one is called Rarities, which is the one you've described and is where we're going to take our song from shortly. Jokers and Queens, that features obviously with Marsha. There's a really good clip of John and Marsha singing You've Lost That Loving Feeling, I think on a Parkinson show when Parkinson was in Australia. That's kicking around on YouTube as well if you want to have a look at that. And the other one is called Six Ribbons, which is the Ultimate Collection. Am I right?
That's correct. And we originally put that collection together with Dad in 2011 when he first signed to Ambition. And it's had a nice repackage and just a bit of a sort of clean-up and a facelift, if you like. It's all available in JB Hi-Fi, Robert wanted me to inform you, for those who are reticent to order online at
he told me that as well, and I said I couldn't really name the music shop concerned, you understand, because we're on community radio, but you can. And that particular store has outlets in Geelong, so I'm sure we can get people towards it. What were those initials again, Jonathan?
I don't know my NATO alphabet. Hang on.
No, it wasn't JE for John English, was it? It was J something else.
Close.
Yeah, that's it, JB. Sorry, oops, it came out. So
I might head down there after we're finished.
I'll tell you the other thing that I would really encourage people to do. Robert's Ambition Records has, I think, about 317 songs because this album is Ambition 317, so I'm assuming he's got 317 of them. He has a website which is Great Music Lives Forever, or indeed Great Music Lives Forever. We talked about it last week. We interviewed Karen Keys, the late Jimmy Keys' wife, last week, and Robert has been working closely with her around some stuff for Masters Apprentices and also for Jim. Great Music Lives Forever. The great thing about going to that website, .com, there's no .com.au on the end of it, is that then supports Robert as well as the artist. So rather than going and putting money into Mr. whatever JB stands for's pocket, if instead you would go directly to greatmusiclivesforever.com, yes, if you don't like going online, go to that shop and buy it, but we can support the great work that Robert is doing as well, because he's doing it with people who deserve the recognition that sadly most of the record companies don't care about anymore.
Exactly.
That was political, wasn't
it? He's got fancy merch up there too.
He does, and where he lives, and I'm not going to say where he lives, but he's got a very nice coffee shop just there and he buys free coffees. Jonathan, it's been an absolute thrill to chat to you today and to talk about the great talent and bloke that your dad was. My favourite thing about John, going back to 1983, I mentioned to you on the phone yesterday, in 1983 he released an album called Some People, which some people had all the fun and some of the tracks off Paris. And in May 1983, he put a concert on at Dallas Brooks Hall, and every cent that was made from that program was donated to the Fitzroy Football Club to help them survive. He's a great Lions man. I know he's also a great Parramatta Eels man, but we prefer to think him as a Fitzroy man down here.
Incredible. You know, I had a Fitzroy Lion growing up, Don Moyes.
Like every good child should.
My little child's treasure chest there. It was a beauty. It was so big. He came back from the airport from Melbourne and it was enormous.
Jonathan, thank you so much for taking some time out of your Saturday morning to chat to us. That website again, greatmusiclivesforever.com. You can go to JB and get a copy of it. One called Rarities, one called Six Ribbons, and another one called Jokers and Queens. Jokers and Queens, of course, featuring the lovely Marsha Hines. Thanks for your time. We'll chat again sometime.
Thank you, Neil and Brad. It's been an absolute pleasure.